Hello people of the internet, it's Amanda, and for today's video, I'm here to talk about the 11th episode of F4 Thailand. So, hello, I'm back to doing this again. I decided to drop the series by episode 7, but then I said there that I probably would pick it up again, and after a couple of weeks of just resting on it, thinking about it, I went back and did a bulk review of episodes 8, 9, and 10 in my previous video, so if you want to check that out, please do. But today we're going to be focusing on the 11th episode of the series. Now, this one I'm particularly excited about, especially ever since the series was announced, because I'm pretty curious about how they're going to do the male lead redemption arc thing. In the other versions, we never really got that, aside from the Japanese version, where they really called out the male lead or Domyoji's actions, not just in the series itself, but also in the sequel, Hana no Chihare. Domyoji felt the repercussions of his actions in Hana Yori Dango season 2, when he found out what it means to lose someone important to you just because of you being crass with your actions. And there are also other iterations of how the characters made him feel, or his past victims made him feel, when it comes to the symbolism of just being there in that particular place where all the abuse of the F4 is happening, and now that's happening to him. So there's a lot of that weight of what he's doing, and it's pouring that into those scenes that really called out the toxicity of F4 and Domyoji as a leader in that particular series. So that's why I absolutely love Hana Yori Dango and Hana no Chihare, is because they never let the male lead just get away with whatever that he did. And in so many different scenarios, they allowed him to experience those things himself. And yeah, so that's why I absolutely love that series, and maybe that's why I also have a lot of expectations for this particular series as to how they're going to take up that redemption arc. Now, with that said, so this episode, I was waiting and waiting and waiting when Thyme was gonna show up, given, you know, the intensity of the scenes that happen in episode 10. Like, we see him rushing to the scene, and therefore I was waiting for him to arrive at that moment. And I kind of wished that he would be there to hear the story of Talay's friend and how everything went and why it's so important, etc., why he's doing this, blah, blah, blah. But the thing is, the first 25 minutes, and I looked at the time just to be sure because it really took that long. It took 25 minutes of exposition of us learning about Talay's backstory, etc., his motivations as to why he's doing what he's doing, and this back and forth between him and Gorya, and at the same time an entire flashback of his relationship with his friend and why he's doing it before Thyme came into the picture. I like that they wanted to give substance to his character and why it's so important to him, but I also feel like the beauty of at least how this entire arc was handled in the other versions is we never really understand, or we never really see the full extent as to why this character, or what the character is standing for, why is it important for him to take revenge in a way. We just know that there are a lot of, it makes the generality or the anonymity of the victims of the F4 even more glaring. Like, for us, we didn't have to know their entire backstory or what kind of person they are for us to know that what the F4 is doing is bad. But for this one, it kind of presses the point that this is this kind of person in the F4, they're horrible. There's this entire juxtaposition that was happening there that was just to give, it made it seem like it's Talay's redemption story in a way. When Thyme came into the picture, I also have a problem with the anti-F4 group, specifically for that one particular character, because I remember specifically that he was in the first episode and he was there also beating up Talay's friend. And now he's in the anti-F4 group. Like, that didn't make sense to me at all, considering that, again, the weight of the entire idea is that the F4 enables that kind of behavior. They give the go signal to the students to make fun of someone, but it was explained in episode 1 that it was like the students are also looking for that particular outlet, and therefore there wasn't any type of like forcing someone to do something. They're doing it based on their own agency, and the F4 are basically just enablers of that particular behavior. And that's why the entire idea of accountability, like, again, the F4 not being at the forefront or not delivering the final punch when it comes to these things, kind of changes the dynamic as well as to the accountability of what goes on in the school. So and seeing that guy in the anti-F4 group now taking revenge and stuff like that, like, it makes me question, Talay, you should also direct your anger towards that particular person, because he was there and he was the one also delivering some of the punches. So yeah, that entire dynamic didn't make sense to me. I'm not sure if they forgot that happened or anything like that, but that particular character being in that scene just didn't make sense to me at all. Another thing is, again, when it's this entire dynamic of the characters psychoanalyzing each other again. Like, they I don't know, there's like an entire psychology session happening, and the way that they portrayed Talay is, I guess it's to mirror Thyme's character in a way that they both have these tendencies and stuff like that. But again, that kind of negates the kind of motive that he initially has. Like, in the other versions, we see him as someone who's really a genuinely good person, right? And he doesn't have any of those tendencies that we see in this particular version. But he did what he did because of what happened to his friend. It's purely out of that particular intention. Whereas for this, I feel like they're trying to mirror Talay and Thyme's character, and then them having these kinds of similarities. It's just that both of them had someone to save them from those tendencies. So I didn't exactly like that, because it painted Talay in also a very different light. And the way that Gorya keeps saying that you're a good person, etc., etc., and they missed the entire point of what this entire arc is about in the other versions, where if you're doing the same thing that Thyme was doing to his victims, that doesn't make you any better than him. And I feel like that was a miss in terms of how Gorya was approaching the situation. Like, instead of her telling Talay that you are a good person, you are against this, blah blah blah, I wish that her dialogue could have been, how does this make you any different from him? It's not like, making him realize that this entire thing is also the same thing like what Thyme was doing to his friend, and again, like, they made it seem like Talay was just this entire antagonistic character at the beginning, and again, that changes the entire dynamic as to how what that scene should stand for. Another thing is when Thyme was like, this isn't the face of someone who's happy. Again, I feel like that was intended to be a mirror of himself whenever he's doing these things, versus, Talay claiming that he likes doing what he's doing, similar to how Thyme was. But again, the impact of the scene feels very bleh, simply because we never really see Thyme reach that particular peak in the earlier episodes. We never really see Thyme claim that this is making him happy. He was saying that this was an outlet for students to be free to whatever, but we never really see him let go of himself and really just do what Talay did to make that mirroring in that particular scene effective. So I'm not sure if I'm making sense, but I get the intention that they have for this scene, that it was meant to, again, provide a parallel for these two characters, and to see just how much Thyme has grown. But I feel like the execution of that, there are a lot of like holes in how they did that. And again, the entire bulk, like the entire 25 minutes of it was just Talay and Gorya just talking about the backstory and stuff like that. And then around not even 10 minutes in, that entire thing, you know, was wrapped up. So I feel like instead of again it being about Thyme's growth, it zoomed in more on Talay's character. Now I know that I'm gonna get like protests when it comes to, but it did show Thyme's growth because he apologized to his victims. I'm gonna be talking more about that later on, but I also want to focus on this particular line that was said in the last part of the series. So if you're a fan of like the other versions, even for the manga, Domyoji, or the main lead's character, was the one who says that if apologies are accepted anytime, then why do we need the police? It's an iconic line that the character of the male lead has always been saying, and he learns why apologies are very important later on into the story, given, you know, his growth. However, in this particular version, Talay was the one who said that, and his friend corrected him, saying that, you know, sometimes apologies make all the difference. And if someone is apologizing and they're willing to change, then I'm willing to forgive them. I have a problem with them giving that line to Talay because, again, it seemed like it's Talay's redemption story. We never really saw Thyme being unapologetic, because the way that we met him, again, this fluctuation of his personality, he's arrogant at one point, and another point he's showing that he's capable of compassion and he's capable of being kind. So he never really had that attitude of not being able to apologize. And so them giving that line to Talay instead of Thyme, it kind of like loses the entire idea of Thyme as a character learning to apologize for his actions, because we see that he's scared of someone even at the beginning. Like, he does all these messy ass things at school, but he was capable of apologizing to Ren and to Gorya and to all of those things in his own way. And yeah, so for me, that was also kind of like a miss. And then, speaking of the apology, so this was something that I really, really liked for this version, is the way that the F4 apologized to their victims. This never happened in the other versions, so this was a good touch. But also, I like how Talay said that, are you doing this for yourself? Because, again, we also have to look at the selfish factor of this action in a way that it took them so long. Like, Thyme already like, if they wanted to do it, they could have, like, I understand the significance of the encounter. It's just that, again, it's also very self-serving, as Talay said. And then Thyme was willing to handle the repercussions of his actions. And then later on, we find out that there was no payoff because his unselfish action of exposing himself didn't turn out well, or like it was like he wasn't exposed or anything like that. So that was kind of like a big question mark moment for me, because, again, if you're gonna push it, like, your character was willing to do this and is willing to really accept, you know, what he's done, or it would have made a bigger impact if, like, the victims of the F4 finally forgave Thyme. But people are out there, like, it's open, like, the secret is out there, and now people are going to judge them for their actions, you know? I think that was kind of like, again, they don't want to add any more tension, I guess, to that particular storyline or anything like that. But for me, that kind of like lost the entire meaning of what Thyme was going through. But I mean, he understood the importance of what was taught to him by that entire situation. But again, he never reaped the entire like the entire consequences of it because of a mistake, or because Talay changed his mind or anything like that. So for me, it would have made a bigger impact if he was forgiven, but he was still put out there for public scrutiny given what he's done, especially with the rate of, because it didn't really change things. Like, the entire point of them was their videos are being deleted. There was no evidence of them doing anything, blah, blah, blah. So this was like a secret within the school, but not outside of it. So, like, for it to not be exposed, it still misses the entire point of you know, them pushing the idea of F4 being able to like handle or mishandle or control social media because of their influence, you know? Like, it kind of negates that. And why include that in the first place? Like, why include them having control over people posting about the F4 and what they're doing if you're not going to have a payoff for it at the end anyways? So there's another thing. Now, again, I mentioned Hana, Yori, Dango in the earlier part of the video, and I think for me, the reason why I like that is because even if in the end we find out that the person that Domyoji thought who died because of his actions in season 2 was actually alive, and it was just a ploy made by his mother so that he would focus on what they call this, on the family business, we really saw the emotional impact and how that changed Domyoji and the way that, like, his actions. And we saw him apologize and act very differently. And I guess for me, I absolutely love that version because it showed him, it really had a consequence. It had a payoff. It had an impact where he was willing to like push everything, and then he realized that this is what he did before. This is what he's a horrible person, and that before he doesn't think of whatever he says has any equivalent action, but then now he does. And for this, it feels like for this version, it just feels like, again, the F4 now has a clean slate. They're forgiven. They never really got any big consequence other than the fact that Thyme was beat up. And that was that. So it just didn't make, like, I understand the intention or what they're trying to do here. But again, it just feels like if you want to go there, you have to really push it, you know? And yeah. And another thing is, and yeah, I mean, it worked out so well for Thyme. Like, again, the consequences of what happened to him, it was more of just him suffering for like a couple of days, thinking about what would happen and stuff like that. But then still him getting his happily ever after. So again, I never really got the entire point of, you know, Talay pointing it out. It makes sense that he said that, you know, you're just doing this for yourself. It's very self-serving and stuff like that. And even with Thyme's actions, the results are the complete antithesis of the whole selflessness thing. So, yeah. Now, with that said, so I still have some things that I did like about the episode. The hospital scene, I was looking forward as to how they're going to do it, because in the other versions, they also did some sort of like this fake prank thing that they did. That was kind of like funny. I like how there's going to be a shift in dynamic when it comes to Lita's character, and they already foreshadowed that given that particular scene. I like Kaning and Kevin's mini moment. Again, I like their dynamic a lot, and I like that it's not just developing into some sort of like crush that Kaning has, but it's really more of like them having this kind of like friendship as well. And it's kind of understandable that even if Kaning is obviously developing romantic feelings already, so there's still that foundation of them just being friends and just being around each other. So that's kind of nice. And I like how they repeated the same idea in the same mood for the birthday thing in episode 8 to this episode with the meteor thing. So I like that. I like how we see Gorya's POV, and now she's finally confessed that she loves Thyme as well. And we see it from her POV when he gives her that necklace. I like that they didn't ruin it again with any other like comedic moments. So again, they're finally in episode 11 episodes in, they're finally learning how to not ruin moments. With punchlines. So I really like that final scene. I'm pretty curious as to what's going to happen for episode 12. But again, I feel like the first half of it, with them trying to cover the redemption arc thing, this doesn't feel like Thyme's redemption arc at all, or F4's redemption arc at all. It felt more of like Talay's redemption arc. And for Thyme, again, it's very lukewarm whenever they try to tap into Thyme's growth. And yeah, I think that's my main issue with the series, is they're trying to, it's so lukewarm when it comes to them handling how they're going to give Thyme growth. And I see a couple of people saying that, you know, it's kind of understandable that it's more of like a back and forth kind of thing that's more realistic and stuff like that. It just feels like they're building up so many things, and then they don't know how to properly balance that with something that, you know, just if they want to send a message across, I just feel like they're gonna go all out with it, instead of them being like pushing a bigger problem and then treating it with something lukewarm and not having that payoff that was in the start of it in the first place. So yeah. Now with that said, so as usual, let's talk it out in the comments below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new to my channel and you would want to hear more from me, please hit subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you again soon in a new video. Bye.